Good morning, everyone. I'm Silvia Negri Firman. I am the press office of His Holiness the Dalai Lama in Italy, and I am so pleased to be here today to start these 2 days of festival dedicated to Tibet and to the discovery of this wonderful documentary, Never Forget Tibet, that is going to be shown later. Today with us, we have very important people. Jetsun Pema, who for over 40 years has taken care of Tibetan children as the president of the Tibetan Children Village and keeps dealing with them and their education. Jean-Paul Mertinez, the director of Never Forget Tibet and founder of Compassionate Films in London, who has devoted himself to finding a way to tell the story of the Tibetan people, and the Dalai Lama finding all the main people who are able to tell this story and contribute to circulate it in the world. And Filippo, Scianna, president of the Italian Buddhist Union. So we're going to start our work with a wonderful message by His Holiness. I'm very pleased to know that a 2-day festival of Tibet will be taking place in Milan. I would like to thank the Italian Buddhist Union and the International Campaign for Tibet for their partnership in making this possible. We Tibetans continue to cherish our aspirations of freedom and dignity being restored in our homeland. It is not only Tibetans' freedom we are concerned with. There is a great deal in Tibet's culture of peace and compassion to contribute towards developing peace of mind through its understanding of the workings of the mind and emotions. As well, its medical knowledge, its peaceful outlook, and respectful attitude to the environment can be of widespread benefit to others. We have been successful in preserving these traditions and values so far, and we will need the continued support of the many friends we already have around the world and many more. I feel sure that this festival will provide an opportunity for us to make many more friends and supporters, and for those we have already to deepen their understanding and appreciation of the rich and distinctive Tibetan Buddhist cultural heritage. I understand that the festival will include a wide range of interesting and enjoyable activities that will provide ample opportunity to explore and share the knowledge and values that we Tibetans derived from ancient Indian thought, based as it is on ethics, wisdom, and compassion. Tibet's peaceful non-violent culture is not only valuable to Tibetans, it can also be conducive to the welfare of the 1.3 billion Chinese people and many others across the world. Therefore, it is important that we make every effort to preserve that culture and keep it alive. I offer my greetings to everyone taking part in this year's Festival of Tibet in Milan. I am sure not only will the occasion be a success, but also that everyone will enjoy themselves. With my prayers and good wishes, Tenzin Gyatso. So you've listened to the words that His Holiness has sent to us. Jetsun Pema, we are here today for 2 days to talk about your people and the Tibetan culture and the land you had to leave. What does this mean for you at this time?
Well, as you are all aware, Tibet is an occupied country, and therefore we who are in exile, we have to be the voice for the voiceless. And therefore, as Tibetans, we have a responsibility to do something, to speak about Tibet, its environment, the situation of the Tibetan people in Tibet. And gatherings like this are important because through this, we can talk about Tibet. Otherwise, if people do not pay attention about the Tibetans, I think Tibet will be forgotten. And that would be a great pity. And therefore, we are very grateful that you have organized this conference, and seeing the wording of the conference, Forever Tibet, that was very encouraging for us, and we hope that Forever Tibet will stay in the minds of the people who come here to listen to what we say and also to see the film, because it is through these kind of initiatives that Tibet will not be forgotten.
Thank you so much. I know you have worked for all your life taking care of the education of Tibetan children. This is a very important part to help your people to keep the culture and tradition, notwithstanding the exile. Can you tell us something about this experience?
His Holiness, ever since he came into exile, he has always felt that the most important thing that we can do while in exile is to give our children a good education. An education that is modern, but at the same time, an education that is deeply rooted in our culture, our religion, so that the Tibetan children who grow up in exile can retain their identity as Tibetans. And so that, because His Holiness's vision was that we educate the children well, and it was, it was our task to educate the children. And today, through the Tibetan children's villages, we have educated over 50,000 young people. And today, these young people are within the Tibetan community, working in different capacity. And for me, it's really encouraging to see that those of us who worked in the children's village, trying to fulfill the wishes of His Holiness, we have accomplished something. And I think it is this education which empowers the youth to go forward in life, to be able to lead their life as they would like to, but at the same time to be a good representative of the Tibetans and to send the message of the Tibetans throughout wherever they might be.
One last question, Amala. The film talks about your people, your story, and the journey you took to leave Tibet. What are your memories of your land?
Well, when I left Tibet, the Chinese had not come to Tibet. It was unoccupied. I left Tibet at the end of 1949. I was 8 years old, and knowing that there was, my parents, knowing that there was problems of the border with the Chinese coming into Tibet, they said it's best to go to India and to go to school. So what I have memories of Tibet is the Tibet that was before occupation. So I have wonderful memories of Tibet because as a 8-year-old, you remember many things. So that way, I'm happy to say that, I have good memories of Tibet, but at the same time, I went back to Tibet in 1980, and what I saw was just very shocking. So the contrast of old Tibet with the occupied Tibet, there was such a vast difference, and that difference has really left an impression on my mind which I will not forget.
Thank you, Jetsun La. I think later we'll have the occasion of asking you more questions. Thank you. Jean-Paul, you are the director of this film and the founder of Compassionate Films in London. Can you please tell us your experience? But I also would like to know why you decided to work on this project that I know is the first of 3 films on this topic. Thank you.
So you are the director of this movie and the founder of Compassionate Films based in London. I will leave you telling us about the film, but I would like to ask you why did you decide to start this
Sta
project?
traducendo quello che è stato detto. Qualcuno dovrebbe dire di dare un ricevitore all'ospite, così può seguire la traduzione simultanea.
Yes, that's correct. So, firstly, buongiorno, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. Really, in answer to your question, Sylvia, I'm not a Buddhist, but as an independent documentary filmmaker, I'm very interested in ideas and issues around social justice, refugees, human rights, and to put it the most simply, I really felt that this was a story that needed to be told. It must be told, you know, and this was the moment to tell it. So we've been working, both myself and my team, with help from many different individuals and organizations for several years to be able to tell this film and share this story. So to be here and share it with you now is a wonderful moment. It's a celebration, but it's also a moment where I think, I really hope that it leaves, once you've seen the film, it leaves you wanting to know more, wanting to ask more questions and understand the plight of the Tibetan people. And in many ways, it's a sad story, but it's also one full of hope. And since 1959, when His Holiness was forced to escape following the Chinese invasion, he's shared so much with the world, you know. He's inspired countless millions of people, pretty much in every country around the world. And I wanted this film to be a document, an important document as part of world history and heritage, but also to show His Holiness that we have heard what he has said, particularly with his commitments to youth empowerment, as Jetsun Pema was sharing with us here, as well as the environmental message. We're sat here today whilst the COP27 environmental talks are taking place. His Holiness has spoken extensively on the environmental crises that faces the world. So the film also incorporates some of these messages, and I wanted it to be something that related to the historical story, but also the modern world, because I think there's many, many lessons to be learnt from this story, and also to be inspired by the great peaceful leadership of His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. And hopefully people who maybe don't know about the history of Tibet can find out about what's happened and want to come forward and find out how they can support the Tibetan people too. Because ultimately, I think unless the Tibetan issue is discussed honestly, society will find it very difficult to move forward. So really, this is our offering to you.
Thank you, Jean-Paul. I know how difficult it is to share the story, how difficult it is, and how many people in the world still have no idea what happened to the Tibetan people. For me personally, I'm not a Buddhist either, but I try to understand what happened, and I fully share the heart and soul of Buddhist Tibetan philosophy. I think it's important for all of us to bring testimony of everything that happened and the key teachings of His Holiness. So thank you for this film. I hand over to Filippo, Scianna, President of the Italian Buddhist Union, who will tell us why we're here. Thank you very much. Thank you to Fondazione Fertinelli for your openness, and thank you for making this room available to us. I started with extending things, and I'd like to thank the organizations that allowed this event. We created a partnership for the organization of this event. First of all, the Campaign for Tibet, for their extraordinary work over the past few years, which allowed to share and deliver such a precious message. So I'd like to thank all the team. I'd like to thank the friends from the Italian Tibet Association, and I'd like to thank them for their precious contributions, starting from Claudio Cardelli, its president, the Association of the Tibetan Community in Italy. Thank you for being here. We are very happy that you can feel the closeness of all of us to the Tibetan cause. And then Garampolam Foundation, which will be represented tomorrow by Tansen Yasen, a foundation that His Holiness wanted to set up. So we're very happy to have this excellent team and group of people for this meeting. We're here because the Italian Buddhist Union loves Tibet. We care for it very much, for a very simple reason. The Italian Buddhist Union is a cultural religious entity gathering 62 centers across Italy, scattered throughout the territory. 35 of them draw from the large heritage of Tibetan Buddhism. So first and foremost, it's a kind of debt that we have to testify the preciousness of the territory from which many benefited, not just in Italy, but across the world. So this is the first intuitive reason. And then there is a duty on our part, the duty to fill this deafening silence around this tragedy, which is a human tragedy. It's a cultural genocide. And we need to tell the story, to share what happens. I think that silence and adding silence to silence is not part of ethical duties, not just among Buddhist practitioners, but also as human beings. So that's the second reason we're here. Thirdly, there is a Tibet that must be remembered, but also a current Tibet who speaks today and speaks for the future. As His Holiness reminded us, there is Tibet going, which is studying the mind, the emotions, and by doing that allows us to draw from teachings, including non-religious teachings. And given the historical moment that we are experiencing, the message is precious. So we will certainly discuss human rights. We will not keep quiet on human rights. But there is a Tibet that tells before any country, any other country worldwide, who talks about environmental disasters, because it's the first that could observe the disasters of the planet. Then we will talk about education and how important education is today. We will hear from extraordinary people who gave a major contribution over the years, soothing suffering, moved by a big heart and big motivation. And we will hear their experience, especially with Tibetan refugee camps. Thank you very much, Filippo. Now we're available for questions. In the meantime, I will start asking questions since I have this great opportunity to sit close to these important people, formidable to me. Jetsun, the history of your people, as Filippo said, is one of the hardest and most important stories worldwide. But unfortunately, very few people know about the history of Tibet. How impactful was this in your choice to work with children, on your lives, on the attempt to keep the Tibetan people united across the world?
That's a difficult question. Anyhow, I'll try to answer because, first of all, you know, when people have lost their country and coming to India as refugees, you face a lot of hardships. And through that hardship, I think we also learn a great deal, because it's through the hardship that one's, you know, strength is a kind of built up. And that way, I think we Tibetans, we lost our country and we had to come into exile, live in India, and now today Tibetans are scattered all over the world. But wherever the Tibetans might be it in Europe or in America, in South America, even we have 3 Tibetans in Iceland, you know. So Tibetans, wherever, you know, you go, you'll find some Tibetans. And when you think of how the Tibetans came into all these places, you always, you know, Tibetans are expected to talk about their homeland, about their history, and about their culture. And I think this has made, you know, the Tibetan awareness in the West, wherever the Tibetans might be. And I think, in a way, that was a very good way for the world to know about Tibet. Because before the Chinese occupation of Tibet, Tibet was a very close country. People didn't know about Tibet, and there were only few Westerners who had been to Tibet and written, you know, about Tibet. Like the most famous book on Tibet is 7 Years in Tibet, which was even a film. And so people came to know in the West about Tibet through this book and a few other books like Alexander David Neal, and then some English travelers who had been British, you know, from Scotland and from England, they went to Tibet. So through those books also, they came to know about Tibet, but not very much. And then when we came into exile, the whole, you know, because of our tragedy, you know, that another country came and occupied our free, you know, country. And so when the refugees poured into India, I think the world at that time in 1959, they became aware of our situation. And that was another good way of introducing about Tibet. And so through this tragedy, I think more people came to know about Tibet. And today, because of the efforts of His Holiness, be it the environment, be it Buddhist religion, be it about, you know, ethics, whatever it might be, His Holiness has been the forefront promoter of the Tibetan issue to the West. And he has traveled in the past, you know, 50 years, he has traveled widely in the West, and through him, people have come to know about Tibet. And then, because of his traveling around, and also because of the Tibetan refugees being in exile, thousands of people, you know, they came to know about Tibet. And that was a wonderful way that people came to know about Tibet. And then at the same time, of course, the situation in Tibet, be it, you know, the political, the way of the life of the Tibetans, be it the environment, all that, what we Tibetans, for thousands of years, what we protected, it was being destroyed under the Chinese. So that effect, it doesn't only affect the Tibetans in Tibet, but it has an effect on the whole of Southeast Asia because of the rivers that are flowing from Tibet into these many different regions, and then also, you know, the snow in Tibet, it's melting. Now they say Tibet is the third pole, and with the glaciers all melting, that's also affecting the environment. So in many different ways, there's a great sort of implication on the whole world. And of course, the most important thing is the message of His Holiness, of peace, of love, compassion. And that, I think it has touched millions of people in the West and all over. And I think that is the real message of the Tibetans, that, you know, to cherish each other, to live in a way that you respect the nature, to, you know, to be aware of your surroundings, and to be aware of everything, that you don't take things for granted, that you have a deeper understanding of everything. And that, I think, His Holiness has shown the way in the West.
Filippo, I'd like to remind how many Tibetans are in Italy, with the president of the Tibetan community in Italy is here. I'd like to give her the floor. She can be more precise in sharing figures. Good morning. First of all, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to Jetsun, Pema, and to the attendees. This is a very special day in Italy, and I have this opportunity to speak about Tibet. My name is Cesar Longhini, president of the Tibetan community in Italy. As Amala explained, the Tibetan situation is critical. It's still tragic. I'm sorry, I'm so excited. I'll try to, concentrate myself. I just wanted to tell you that in Italy, the Tibetan community is comprised of about 200 Tibetan people. The Tibetan community originated in 1984 with this extreme need to form this community in view of the fact that the situation in Tibet was dramatically changing. So the few Tibetans that were here got together and gave rise to this association. The purpose of the association is to promote and share information on the situation of Tibet, which is under the Chinese now for 64 years. There are 165 Tibetans now, and, children, women, and monks, they got together to protest. They they killed themselves without hurting anyone. But the opinion of the world was not so strong in this respect. Now, since the situation is so dramatic, and it's also so current, now the time has come to become aware and to be determined in changing the situation in Tibet. We have to remember these people who kill themselves in the name of freedom and justice. We cannot keep quiet. We cannot leave it to itself and forget what happened. So in the presence of journalists, reporters, I'm asking you to communicate and to share information so that more people will know and will become aware of the situation in Tibet. Thank you from the heart. Long live the Dalai Lama and long live Jetsun Pema. They are our life and our engine. The Dalai Lama gave hope and education to millions of Tibetan children. And it's continuing, thanks to ICT and to the supporters for the work that you do. In the coming 2 days, when we are going to share information on Tibet, I hope more people will come forward and support Tibet. Thank you. Thank you very much. Free Tibet.
Thank you. So I'm going to continue asking some more questions, but if there's anyone who would like to ask a question, please do raise your hand. This, the topic we're talking about and what Filippo was saying before, I would like to ask Jean-Paul how much the political situation, which is the most complicated part concerning the Tibetan topic, has complicated your work. How difficult was it to put this project together?
Grazie. Well, the film's taken 4 years to make, and another year to get the distribution that we have so far. So I think the fact it's taken us 4 years gives a good indication of how difficult it's been. To say that there was obstacles and hurdles at each stage of the way would be an understatement. But fortunately, the creative community in the UK and around the world people have known this story needed to be told for a very long time, but it's also taken a very long time, 64 years in order for the story to, in some ways, to be ready to be told. We're Compassionate Films is an independent film production company focused on environmental and social issues. That's the only subjects we cover. Within that, of course, is spirituality as well. And that, fortunately, we found the right people who wanted to support us. Some of the leaders in the UK industry stepped forward and gave their commitment and said, yes, now is the time. It has to be told now. And so that's what's brought us here. Yeah. Yeah.
So if everything is clear, we can continue with our program. And now there's going to be an important message from Deepak Chopra. If I may, Silvia. If I may, just one more thank you. First of all, I haven't mentioned, maybe because it was too close to me, Jean-Paul, for his collaboration, for the wonderful relationship in the last week with Jean-Paul, his production, Mina, all the people who have worked for the production of the documentary. And I really invite all of you to watch it, because it's not only a film documentary, but it's an historical document that needs to be spread out. Then I would like to thank all the friends of Boiler who really gave us a big hand for this event, the staff of Negrifirma, of your office, Silvia, all the kids that up to very late last night have given us a hand. It's always a privilege and an honor working with you. Thank you. Also, I would like to remind you that the program involves a message by Deepak Chopra and a short meditation. And after, we're going to see Never Forget Tibet.
I'm Dr. Deepak Chopra, and I feel very privileged and honored to be part of this great launch in Milan. First of all, I have to say it's impossible to forget Tibet. Tibet brings an ancient culture and wisdom that the modern world needs very desperately. In fact, if we don't hearken to the message that this film is bringing and to the greatness of, I think, the modern day Bodhisattva, His Holiness Dalai Lama. If we don't listen carefully and hearken to the wisdom, then we're sleepwalking to extinction with everything that's happening. Climate change, social and economic injustice, extinction of species, and chronic illness, and total absence of joy in our world, where actually depression has become the #1 epidemic, pandemic of our time. I've known His Holiness for at least 40 years, having met him off and on, and even having visited him in Dharamsala. His Holiness is the embodiment of joy, ultimate truth, that we are avatars of joy. We are incarnations of the divine, however we define the divine. And he brings the message of empathy, which is feeling what others feel, especially those who are suffering, compassion, the desire to alleviate suffering, and love in action, because love without action is meaningless, and action without love is irrelevant. His Holiness brings all of that. And he also brings us the true understanding of freedom, because true freedom lies within, and that will project into the world. If we listen and carefully watch this film, we will see that His Holiness and the message of Don't Forget Tibet is not only relevant for our times, but could save our humanity. For those of you who are impacted by this film and are asking yourself, what can I do? Listen carefully to what is being said and ask yourself, how can I be the change I want to see in the world? Activism, especially angry activism, doesn't work. It's been tried in the past. To be a peace activist, to be an angry peace activist is an oxymoron. Peace can only be created by those who are peaceful. And joy can only be imparted by those who are joyful. And love can only be shared by those who have experienced love. And His Holiness embodies all those things. So if you want to help the world, follow the example of His Holiness.